नंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज विहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा श्रील प्रभुपदा जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमती स्वामी श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक अष्टोत्तर सदस्य श्रीमद् भक्तिवेदांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। जय विष्णुपाद लखोर किशोर दास महाराज की जय। जय विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद श्रील भक्तिविनोद ठाकुर की जय। जय विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जी गोपाल भट्टदास रघुनाथ गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से गो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपकुंड श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिगोवर्धन की जय। श्री श्री गौरांगी बेंगलोरीश्वर भगवान की जय। श्री मायपुर धाम की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। गंगमयी की जय। यमुनामयी की जय। भक्ति देव की जय। तुलसी देवी की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय। श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। इस्कॉन गुरुवंद की जय। समावेद भक्तवृंद की जय। गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Divim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire. Nashtaprayeshu Apatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtihi. Hare Krishna, welcome to this Friday morning, Friday morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 29, Text 29 and 30. Text 29. Tatrati sparsha vedibhyah pravararasa vedinah tevyo gandha vidah shreshtash tadah shabda vido varaha. Tatrapi sparsha vedibhyah pravararasa vedinah tevyo gandha vidah shreshtash tadah shabda vido varaha. Tatrapi sparsha vedibhyah pravararasa vedinah tevyo gandha vidah shreshtash tadah shabda vido varaha. Translation Chilabhokya. Among the living entities who have developed sense perception, those who have developed the sense of taste are better than those who have developed only the sense of touch. Better than them are those who have developed the sense of smell, and better still are those who have developed the sense of hearing. Although Westerners accept that Darwin first expounded the doctrine of evolution, the science of anthropology is not new. The development of the evolutionary process was known long before from the Bhagavatam, which was written 5,000 years ago. There are records of the statements of Kapila Muni, who was present almost in the beginning of the creation. This knowledge has existed since the Vedic time, and all these sequences are disclosed in the Vedic literature. The theory of gradual evolution or anthropology is not new to the Vedas. It is said here that amongst the trees, there are also evolutionary processes. The different kinds of trees have touch perception. It is said that better than the trees are the fish, because fish have developed that sense of taste. Better than the fish are the bees, who have developed the sense of smell, and better than them are the serpents, because serpents have developed the sense of hearing. In the darkness of night, a snake can find it eatable simply by hearing the frog's very pleasant cry. The snake can understand there is the frog, and he captures the frog simply because of its sound vibration. This example is sometimes given for persons who vibrate sounds simply for death. One may have very nice tongue that can vibrate sound like the frogs, but that kind of vibration is simply calling death. The best use of the tongue and of sound vibration is to chant the Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That will protect one from the hands of cruel death. Text 30. Rupa Bheda Vidastatra Tatashchobayato Dadaha Tesham Bahupadaha Shreshtas Chatuspadas Tato Dvipat. Translation Srila Prabhupada. Better than those living entities who can perceive sound are those who can distinguish between one form and another. Better than them are those who have developed upper and lower sets of teeth, and better still are those who have many legs. Better than them are the quadrupeds, and better still are the human beings. It is said that certain birds such as crows can distinguish one form from another. Living entities that have many legs like the wasp are better than plants and grasses which have no legs. Four-legged animals are better than many-legged living entities, and better than the animals is the human being who has only two legs. Om Kyantimirandasya Jnananjanushalakaya Chakshurmilitam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rup Kadamahim Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Chakrajatam Sarvana Raghunatantam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Sagurutam Parjaya Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Chagana Lalita Shri Kshakanditamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Kushamanste Devi Pranamami Haripriya Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasnubhye Vicha Padadanam Pavane Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gauri Bhaktavarana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Moham Karoti Vachalam Bhagam Langedi Vyakapad Muhammad Deshi Dharma Paramananda Madam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So here in these two verses, we see the evolution of the various species of life, how a living entity passes through various species with different qualities. So first we come to text number 29, where it is mentioned that among the living entities who have developed sense perception, those who have developed the sense of taste are better than those who have developed only sense of touch. Better than them are those who have developed the sense of smell, and better still are those who have developed the sense of hearing. So, the first category, the Srila Prabhupada mentions about how this evolutionary theory existed much before even the compiling of Srimad Bhagavatam took place, which was about 5,000 years before. So this theory is known as anthropology, and it existed not as many people think that Darwin found this theory of evolution, but it existed even before that when Srimad Bhagavatam was compiled. So it's a very scientific process, and we'll understand how each of these species, we have gone through each of these species of life and come to the human form of life. So before we come to that, there are different varieties of living entities on different planets. As I mentioned before, there are many planets in this universe itself. This universe is supposed to be the smallest one. And our earthly planet is just one of the planets in the entire universe. And in each and every planet, there are living entities, and they derive their sustenance from their respective planets in different forms. That means in every planet, there are different types of food according to the needs of the living entities who are there as its residents. So from this, we will see how Srila Prabhupada mentions about the trees, which are one stage of creation. So the trees are the early stages of creation, and everywhere there are trees in all the planetary systems, even the higher planetary systems like Satyaloka and others, there are trees also. Now, the living entities on the higher planetary systems, like humans, they live for about 10,000 years, but the calculation of the years for them is much different from ours. 6 months of hours is equal to 1 day in the higher planetary systems. So the demigods in the heavenly planets live for months, years, and 10,000s of years according to their calculation of time. And again, after the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they fall down to this earthly planet. So also there is the mention, all these quotes are from Srimad Bhagavatam. As there are people who live for 10,000 years of the demigods in the upper planetary systems, so also do the trees. Even in this earthly planet, it is mentioned that there are many trees which live for 10,000 years or so. What to speak of trees on the higher planetary systems. So there, in the higher planetary systems, the trees must live more than 10,000 years. And sometimes these trees, valuable trees, can also be moved from one place to another. One example is given as to how when Lord Krishna performed the pastime of giving bringing the Parijata tree from the heavenly planet to please his wife Satyamama. He brought it to the earthly planet. That means trees can be moved also. Then, as we see many different classes of men in the human society. We see some are very, very pious and who are very virtuous, and some impious and who are very sinful also. So also it is said that among trees and birds, there are many pious living entities and there are many impious also. So, for example, one example that is given here is that trees which do not bear nice fruits or good flowers are called impious, are considered to be impious. For example, we might find many trees with a very thorny, they don't have any flowers, there are thick bushes, and no, generally nobody would like to go near that. So they are all got that form of life due to their impious activities. On the other hand, it is mentioned that the trees without there are six categories, six types of living entities among the trees also, among the immovable entities. The fruit, there are trees, there are fruit trees without flowers. That means there are trees which have fruits, but they don't have flowers. Then there are plants which exist until the fruit is ripe and then they die. Then there are creepers. Then there are pipe plants. And there are creepers which have no support. And there are trees with flowers and fruits. So of all these six categories, the trees with flowers and fruits are supposed to be pious. Now, generally, if we consider in our normal day-to-day routine, we see from the philosophical point of view, trees are very considered to be a lower species of life in terms of their consciousness. Now, all these trees and plants, they take their look for their sustenance from upward. That means they get their sunshine from the top, and even though we may water the plant down, it goes to the top also. That is their way of sustenance, and they are as good as unconscious, but they also have feelings of pain within them, and there are varieties. They are manifested in variegatedness. There are varieties of flowers, fruit, flower trees. There are varieties of fruit trees also. Then just the different stages of growth in the growth. For example, there may be a budding stage, the blooming stage, and the full-fledged grown-up stage. Then the aroma, flowers with aroma and beauty. Similarly, all the things in all the species of forms of living entities, out of the 84 lakh species of life, living entities go through a gradual evolution, and there's a very systematic progress that takes place from one species of life to the higher. Now, of all these, human form of life is supposed to be the highest, but because it offers consciousness by which one can understand how one can get rid of the cycle of birth and death. This is there in the next one or two chapters that is coming up. We'll study in detail. Now, animals in bodies lower than that of human being are conscious only as far as their bodily distress and happiness are concerned. They know only their distress and they don't and happiness. That they cannot think of more than that. In the human form of life, we can understand what is right, what is wrong. We have that capability of discrimination, but they don't have. But their life, animal species of life, mostly spend their time in eating, mating, sleeping, and defending. Now, in the next category, it is mentioned as to how better than the trees are the fish, because fish have developed a sense of taste. Now, there is one thing that even amongst trees, if there are two trees, one might, if a strong tree comes, if there is one strong tree and there is another small plant, the strong tree will find its way to grow. The plant will have difficulties, so the plant finally takes shelter of the strong tree, or its growth is restricted due to the strong tree. We find in the human form of life also, somebody is very strong, somebody is very weak, like that. So even among all these living entities, we will find different categories, different types, and so forth. Then the next that is mentioned is about the better than the trees are the fish, because the fish have developed a sense of taste. Then better than the fish are the bees, who have developed a sense of smell. And better than the bees are the serpents, because serpents have developed a sense of hearing. Now, the previous ones, they might be having a very small magnitude of sense of hearing, but generally they don't have those senses. But from serpent onwards, they can hear. And then it is example, Srila Prabhupada gives an example as to how in the night a snake can find its food simply by hearing a frog's pleasant cry. Now, we all might not like a frog's cry, but to a snake, he hears it to be very, very pleasant because that is a food for him. So this just the frog keeps croaking, and the snake thinks, yes, this is my food, and they eat the frog. Now, Srila Prabhupada also gives an example how human beings are there who vibrate sounds simply inviting death. Now, there are many people who don't understand the value of the spiritual aspects in life, but they may vibrate, they may gossip a lot of material affairs like politics, sports, this, that. So they may vibrate sound, but they bring only death. Death, of course, everybody has to die. But then vibrating uh, material sounds at the time of death is like simply calling the death of a frog. Frog croaks and the snake comes and eats. Similarly, a highly materialistic person, when he is about to die, he also does guru, guru, guru. This also is there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which we'll study in the next one or two chapters. What happens to a living one in the human form of life when he's about to take birth, and what happens to him when he's about to die also. But the best use of the tongue can be used when one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, that is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this is what is the process of Krishna consciousness, which can protect one from the hands of cruel death. Otherwise, death is cruel. Example is given in the Shastra, in the Bhagavatam itself, about how when a kitten is there, the cat holds the kitten is held by the cat in its mouth, in between its jaws. But the kitten takes it out of feeling of love. But the same cat, when it holds a rat between its teeth, the rat is struggling to survive and it is wanting to get out of somehow or the other to survive. But that also is killed by the rat and eaten by the cat. So that is how materialistic people, when they die, it is a death calling with that material sound vibration at the end of their life. But one who understands this philosophy of this evolutionary process, how one goes through each of these processes and then finally comes to the human form of life, will take up the path of Krishna consciousness. Now, there is a mention, fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, how below the earthly planets, there is Talatala planet, there is known as Mahatala, and in those planets, how impious living beings, like take the form of snakes. Now, snakes, it is said they are always very, very angry. And some names are also given, I'll not go into that. But these snakes in the Mahatala are disturbed all the time by fear of Garuda. And they are all full of anxiety. But in spite of all that anxiety that they live in, they support themselves they also have wives, children, friends, relatives, etc. So this is what we see in the human form of life also. How a materialistic person tries to live comfortably along with the circle of his friends, relatives, etc. But at least in the human form of life, one can understand that there is something called happiness and there is something called distress. But these lower species of life, they cannot understand. They can only live for birth, death, old age, and disease, and only for their sustenance. So here, then there is mention about birds. Better than in one category, it is mentioned that better than the living entities who can perceive sound are those who can distinguish between one form and the other. It is said that certain birds, such as crows, can distinguish one form to the other. That means the crows can identify. Now, also it is a mention that birds which are very nasty are considered impious. That means even amongst birds. That means in all the species of life, those who are impious, there is categories who get impious forms of life, and there are categories which get some pious forms of life also in all these species of life, like birds, trees, plants, etc. Now, also there is a mention about how in among the bird there is a particular type of bird which is very much fond of eating monkeys. Eagles are very fond of eating goats, and there are many birds which eat only fruits and berries. For example, parrot is supposed to be much better than the bird. Then even in the materialistic platform, parrot is supposed to be much better bird than a crow. Crow keeps eating all the garbage, so it is due to its impious activities. But a parrot lives only on fruits. So, like that, every species of life we look at, there are pious and impious forms depending on their activities. Now, better than those who have developed these forms of life are those who have developed upper and lower sets of teeth. That means there are species which have upper and lower forms of teeth, but the previous ones don't have the upper and lower forms of teeth. It's also said that how a snake actually does, though it bites, it gives poison and it swallows the prey. And better than those who have these teeth are those who have many legs. For example, it is said that wasps have many legs, and better than the wasps are the living entities with multiple legs are those with four legs, which are called quadrupeds. Quadrupeds. And most of them are extremely foolish and ignorant. They know their desirables only by smell. They are unable to remember anything within their heart. They don't have any memory like human beings. But human beings are very fortunate to have some memory. Lower animals have their knowledge only for hunger and thirst. They don't know anything beyond hunger and thirst. They have no acquired knowledge, and they also don't have vision also, and their behavior exhibits no dependence on formalities. Like we see many times in the streets, dogs may be mating. Other animals also, they creatures also they mate. They don't have any formality. Now, the animals, some of them, they know their desirables only by smell, and by such intelligence, they can understand what is favorable and unfavorable. And they are concerned mostly about eating and sleeping. That is why it is said even the most ferocious lower animals, such as tigers, can be tamed simply by regularly supplying meals. That means if we supply their food on time, we can tame them, and they want some place to sleep. So eating and sleeping, they can be tamed. But it is also mentioned that snakes cannot be tamed by such an arrangement. Then, of course, of the lower animals, there are those like goats, buffaloes, deer, lamb, camel. They are those, and there are those which have cloven hooves. Now, the horse, mule, etc., have one hoof, and there are those with many hoofs. These are different classifications, and each one have got their own qualities. I'm not going to detail into all this. Then there are animals with 5 nails. Like, for example, the dog, the jackal, tiger, fox, cat, monkey, they all have 5 nails in their claws. They are known as panchanakas, or animals having 5 nails. Then the human form of life. It is mentioned as to how better still are the human beings. In the human form of life, by the grace of God, the consciousness is so developed that a man can evaluate his exceptional position and thus realize what he is, that and who is God, and what is his relationship with God. So from now on, I've just given some basic criteria of classification. We will understand, in spite of lower forms of life, it is said that mentioned the Srimad Bhagavatam as to how one can learn from each species of life also. They have their qualities also. But what we can take from the various species of life, That is also mentioned. We'll go through some of these. In the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is mention as to how one who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and the marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, and who has not sung or chanted loudly the worthy songs about the Lord, is to be considered to possess a ear holes like the holes of a snake and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. That means in the human form of life, one who has not chanted the holy names of the Lord, or one who has not heard the glories of the personality of Godhead, they are supposed to be considered to be having ear holes like the holes of a snake and a tongue like the tongue of a frog. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, the frog croaks, the snake hears, and the snake takes its prey. So, like that, those who are materialistic, who have not chanted the glories of the Lord or heard the glories of the Lord, they are supposed to be having holes of snakes, ear holes like that of a snake, and tongue like the tongue of a frog. Then there is a mention in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as to how even among human beings, they are compared to snakes. Now, position of demoniac householders and such houses are considered to be residential quarters of venomous snakes. Why it is mentioned? The members of such families are no better than snakes because snakes are very, very envious. So we see that in our common life also, many are very, very envious of the others. So their life is like that of a snake. So such people can get degraded to a lower form of life like a snake if they are envious throughout their life. And what happens, that is also mentioned here. When that envy is directed to the saintly persons, their position becomes much more dangerous. So when materialistic envious people become envious over saintly persons, their position is much more dangerous. He said that Chanakya Pandita, Srila Prabhupada always quotes about Chanakya Pandita. So he mentioned there are two envious living entities, the snake and an envious man. And it is one of the meaning on that is that envious man is more dangerous than a snake because a snake can be subdued by chanting mantras or by herbs. But an envious person cannot be pacified by any means. That means that one in the human form of life, if he is envious, it is very difficult to pacify him. But a snake can be pacified by chanting the mantras or giving some herbs. And also there is mention as to how a person living in a temporary material body tries to construct a happy house. But the result is fruitless and miserable. Why? Because a snake enters a home that has been built by others and prospers happily. That means of course, it may not happen in a town, but we see many times, even during rainy season, snakes enter when there is rain. People build their house with a lot of time, efforts, money, resources, etc. But a snake comes and lives very happily. So similarly, envious people try to visit such materialistic people. There is also a quote on how there is an example. Python, as we all know, is a form of a snake. It's classified within the snake. But what can one take? This is also mentioned in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Following the example of a python, one should give up material endeavors and accept for one's maintenance food that comes of its own accord, whether such food be delicious or tasteless or ample or meager. So the point is that this python, it is said that it does not go hunting for prey, but it lies down till it gets its foot on till its prey comes to it, near to it. But the python does not struggle to work like the way human beings work today. Uh, Pythons don't work very hard, but human beings work hard like animals these days. So, example is that whether the food is delicious or taste, or whether it is sufficient or ample, the python just keeps lying down. This is one quality that is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then it is mentioned that if at any time food does not come, a saintly person should fast for many days without making any extra endeavor. He should understand that by God's arrangement, he must fast. Thus, following the example of a python, he should remain peaceful and patient. That means in the human form of life, one can take this lesson from a python, that if one does not get sufficient food by overdoing his endeavor, that means not only food, if one is not getting sufficient, he might be greedy, but one should be very peaceful and patient and not try to over endeavor and in the process commit sinful activities or crime. And then it is mentioned that a saintly person should accept only enough food to keep his body and soul together. This which Srila Prabhupada has mentioned many of his classes, that a good person is one who should not work who should not over endeavor to accumulate. Rather, he should work just to keep his body and soul together. And the example is given about a bumblebee. It is said that a bumblebee is attracted by extraordinary aroma of a particular lotus flower and keeps lingering there. But he neglects his usual activity of flying from flower to flower. And at sunset, what happens? The lotus flower closes, and thus infatuated bumblebee is trapped. Similarly, a saintly person may discover that excellent food is available in many places, but instead of wandering from place to place, he may become a veritable resident of such a well-fed household. That means one should not try to over endeavor to try to such palatable food going from place to place and door to door. And such persons become bewildered by the illusion of family life and fall down from the platform of renunciation. That means human form of life is meant to have renunciation. An ideal sage is one who, like a bumblebee, travel from place to place, but he must be careful not to become a chubby bee by going to many houses and eating sumptuously at each house. So the bumblebee sometimes can become chubby by going from flower to flower. So one should not just try to overeat and try to become chubby. This is one lesson. So according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, such a chubby bee will undoubtedly become entangled in the network of Maya. No one should be overly attached to the gratification of his tongue, because this will lead to an overstuffed belly and then uncontrollable lust. That means when one overeats, he becomes very fat, and then he reaches a stage where he's not able to control his lusty desires. Then there's one more point mentioned, that just as bumblebee takes nectar from all flowers, big and small, an intelligent human being should take the essence from the scriptures. That means all the scriptures have some examples which can be taken as a path in our own life, like these which I mentioned. From a bumblebee, an intelligent man should learn to take the essence or nectar of all the knowledge. That means intelligent person who is one who tries to take the essence of all the nectar or the nectar of all knowledge. A bumblebee does not waste its time trying to carry away an entire bush or garden, but rather takes the essential nectar. We must study the difference between the bumblebee and an ass who carries heavy loads. So bumblebee takes the essence of all knowledge, but an ass carries a lot of heavy loads. So over-education or education does not mean one should become a very intellectual ass carrying heavy loads of useless knowledge. That means many people today do 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, but what is the use of all this if one has wasted the human form of life? One should take only the essential knowledge that leads one to an eternal life of bliss and understanding. Also, a saintly person should not think that this food I will keep to eat tonight and this other food I can save for tomorrow. So generally, if you go to a Grihastha's house, these days with multiple conveniences, people don't cook and they keep stored in the refrigerators, etc. So one should not store such food saying that I'll eat this for tomorrow. A saintly person is one who should not store food acquired by begging. one should not, the point is that one should not over-enter the store. Rather, he should use his hands as his plate and eat whatever fits on them. That means one should not over-endeavor to overeat also. His only storage container should be his belly, and whatever conveniently fits into his belly should be his stock of food. Thus, one should not imitate the greedy honeybee who eagerly collects more and more honey. So, in the purport, there's a mention that there are two types of bees. One is called the bumblebee. They collect nectar from flowers, but they do not make honey. And honeybees manufacture honey in their beehive. So this refers to honeybees. A greedy honeybee is one which eventually collects so much honey, but what happens is that eventually he's trapped in his hive. And the same way, a materialistic person becomes trapped under the burden of unnecessary material accumulation. The point is that many people try to over endeavor, take loans here, there, here, get trapped into debt in various levels, and then finally, when they are not in a position to pay the debt is carried forward to their generation, because in the Shastras it is mentioned that if a father is not able to pay his debt, his children should pay back. So, like that, when somebody is not able to pay, we see that these days many people commit suicide. So, one should not over endeavor to over accumulate also. One should not even collect foodstuffs to eat later in the same day or the next day. If we disregard this injunction and like the honeybee collects more and more delicious foodstuff, that which he has collected will ruin him one day. That means people get today trapped by trying to over endeavor to accumulate more and more, like the honey in the beehive. And there's mention as to how a greedy person accumulates a large quantity of money with great struggle and pain. But the person who has struggled so much to acquire this wealth is not allowed to enjoy it himself or give it in charity to others. See, we find today many people who have struggled a lot to accumulate a lot, but neither are they enjoying it nor do they give it in charity. So a greedy man is like the bee who struggles to produce a large quantity of honey, which is then stolen by a man who will enjoy it personally or sell it to others. So bee honey collects a lot of this category of honey, the bees, they collect a lot of honey. But what happens is somebody else comes and takes it away. So Srila Prabhupada mentions as to how, no matter how carefully one hides his hard-earned wealth or tries to protect it, there are those who are expert in detecting the whereabouts of valuable things and they steal it. See, one of the common things that we find is that the moment when somebody's got a lot of money, there are many people who are waiting to extort such money. So this is a typical example. And then another example that is given is deer. A saintly person dwelling in a forest should never listen to songs or music promoting material enjoyment. Example is given that we should take the example of a deer who is bewildered by the sweet music of a hunter. That means a hunter actually catches a deer by playing some sweet music. The deer gets carried away by it, and ultimately the hunter kills the deer. Of course, some example are given. Then one more example that's given, just as a fish incited by the desire to enjoy his tongue, how a fish is trapped. A fisherman puts its prey on the hook. He puts small worms because fish eats worms. So he puts a small worm on the hook and then the fisherman picks up the fish. Similarly, a foolish person is bewildered by extremely disturbing urges of the tongue and thus he is ruined. And then in terms of sustenance of all of these species of life, that's also mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, where it is mentioned, the sixth canto, that by nature's arrangement, fruits and flowers are considered the food of insects and birds. That means insects and birds Of course, there may be some who might eat the other species also. Fruits and flowers are considered the food of the insects and birds. Grass and other legless living entities are meant to be the food for four-legged animals like cows and buffalo. Animals that cannot use their front legs as hands are meant to be the food of animals like tigers, which have claws. I mentioned about the different species with 5 nails and all. And four-legged animals like deer and goats, as well as food grains, are meant to be food for a human being. That means human being is not supposed to eat any other thing other than these. Now, one might have a question as to how they can eat goats, but these are meant for those who are in the lower forms, pieces of human form of life, like Shudras, etc. If they consume, of course, one has to take the reactions for these also. Then there's a mention in the 11th canto as to how even in higher planetaries like Siddhaloka, one can attain a lot of yogic perfection. That means they can fly by without any external uh, uh, airplane or things like that. They can go from one planet to the other. So similarly, it is mentioned by birth as a fish, one becomes invulnerable to water. By birth as a bird, one gets the mystic perfection of flying. And by birth as a ghost, one gets the mystic perfection of disappearing and entering into the bodies of others. So these are given examples. The reason is that one might have uh, a lot of taste. Like we see that people who spend a lot of greater part of their life as a fish, but if their karma is low, they can become a fish. And sometimes some can get the birth as a bird because someone has a desire to fly like a bird, can get the bird body as a bird. And sometimes as a ghost, one can disappear and enter into the bodies of others. And Srila Prabhupada also mentioned that Patanjali Muni also states that these can be achieved by birth, by herbs, by austerities, or by mantras. That means Patanjali also confirms that there is a gradual evolution to various forms of life. In spite of all these things, it is mentioned that happiness and distress is there in all the planets, in all the forms of life. That means from the higher planet like Brahmaloka to the lowest like Patal Loka, whatever forms of life one has got, one is not free from the cycle of birth and death. So the point is that how should we uh, what should we learn? Example is given in the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as to how a great king like Maharaja Ambrisha, he always engaged his mind in meditating upon the lotus feet of Krishna. He was always focusing his mind on thinking about Lord Krishna. His words were always in describing used in describing the glories of the Lord. Maharaj was a great king, but at the same time, he was a great devotee of the Lord. So it does not mean that if one takes up the path of devotion and service, one is bereft of his material life. The example is given that even if we see today in current day life, there are many who are very well off materially. At the same time, they practice their spiritual life also. So Maharaj Ambrisha, he was utilizing his words in describing the glories of the Lord. His hands in cleansing the Lord's temple. The more one utilizes his hands in many times people come to devotion service and they think that cleaning the paraphernalia utilized in the service of the Lord is a very lower, no. Uh, on the other hand, the more one utilizes his hands in washing the paraphernalia, more one becomes purified. So Maharaj Ambrisha used his hands in cleaning the Lord's temple, and his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna. He always utilized in hearing about Krishna or speaking about Krishna. He engaged his eyes in seeing the deity of Krishna, Krishna's temples and Krishna's places like Mathura and Vrindavan. He engaged his sense of touch in touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi offered to the Lord. So, by smelling the fragrance of the flowers or tulasi which is offered to the Lord, one can get free from a lot of contamination. And he engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasada. So that is why it is said in the human form of life, one has got the capacity to understand what one should eat and one should not eat. He engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord. Nowadays, people don't want to walk also, even if there's something nearby. They want to take the convenience means of traveling. He engaged his head in bowing down before the Lord and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. That means the more one offers his obeisances to the Lord, the more one becomes humble. And this way, Maharaj Amrisha, engaged all desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. Indeed, Maharaja Amrisha never desired anything for his own sense gratification. So this example is given for us to understand human form of life is not meant for sense gratification. He engaged all his senses in devotional service in various engagements related to the Lord. And this is the way to increase attachment for the Lord and be completely free from all material desires. Now, desire is something, it flows like the waves of ocean in a river. We fulfill one desire, there is another desire that is waiting to be fulfilled. And it is constant. You can't have satisfaction of material desire. But the example of Maharaja Ambrisha is given so that he was engaging all his senses, his mind, including the mind, in the service of the Lord. And this way, like him, one can develop attachment for the Lord and become free from all material desires. It is not possible to stop the flow of material desires, but it is possible to divert our senses, including the mind, in engaging in the services of the Lord, by which one can become free from all these material desires. So, with this, some other points which I'm not touching now, maybe in the subsequent classes. So with this, I conclude the class for the day. If any of you have got any questions, any comments, you can ask me for the next few minutes.
Very nice class, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mother.
Thank you very much, Mother. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhu. You have any questions, Prabhu? Anybody else? Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, can I take the class as concluded? Can I leave, Prabhu? I think there are no questions, comments. So can I leave? So I'm leaving now. So thank you all very much. Grantha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mother.